everybody. Tim from Alpha Wolf Trading coming at you with this week's stocks to watch for trading and investing. All right, so let's take a look at what we've got coming up for the week. For the economic calendar. Actually, this is the one I had on last week's video. There's not a significant amount of economic data. It looks like it's going to impact the week, but there are a couple of things here. We've got the NFIB Small Business Index, PPI, that could be something that impacts the market. Consumer Price Index, core CPI, federal budget, weekly jobless claims, retail sales, ex autos, industrial production. So there are some things that could impact the markets, but we'll see how it plays out. I think the main focus next week is going to be, the tariffs not being imposed on Mexico. Of course, I think the China rhetoric will kick back up, but we'll see how it plays out for next week. Let me take a look at the indexes and what I'll be watching for next week. So I just got done watching Fast Money, or was it Options Action, one of them from Friday. Gold is being talked about as potential breakout, and in a breakout area. I am more thinking that we're going to get another pullback. Gold is at an area, multi-year breakout, but 1350 area has been acting as resistance for several years, and I have a feeling we're going to see a pullback once again. But we are approaching a pretty significant area to potentially break out. But with, I think, the tariff concerns being lifted from Mexico, I think we could actually see some weakness in gold next week. So we'll see how it plays out. But if you had this nice run in gold and gold miners, I would be looking to take some off and maybe look for a pullback in that space. IBB, I mentioned last week, was one of the sectors that led to the downside, was one of the first to crack, pulled back, and now we could be putting in a higher low. We are below the 50-day and the 200-day, but I think it's a space to keep an eye on. I was kind of surprised that from the ASCO conference we did not see any really huge runners in the biotech space, but I still think it's a sector that you want to be paying pretty close attention to. IWM, small caps, also in the same situation. We could be putting in a higher low. We'll see how that plays out. We're below the 50-day and the 200-day, but and we are at an area of potential price resistance. We'll see if we can crack through that and reclaim the 50 and 200-day moving averages. IYT transportation, another same scenario, right? We're seeing the same scenario with all of these sectors. So we've got a potential higher low. We're back to an area of potential price resistance. We'll see if we can go back up and reclaim the 50 and 200-day. May find resistance in all of these, in all of these sectors. We may find resistance at those moving averages. So JDST, so the flip side of gold, if gold does really start to roll over and pull back, JDST, triple levered bear ETF, could get a little bit of a lift, could be a trading opportunity there, so worth keeping an eye on. JNUG is a triple bull ETF, and if we see weakness, we could see a pullback in JNUG. If gold rips, then maybe we see a nice move in JNUG and Nugget, but I think that these things in the near term are looking a bit extended. So QQQs, we had a nice little bounce last week. in a lot of the big tech names. Let's see what happens if we get any kind of follow through. My concern with the fact that we're going to gap up on Monday, it's looking like, as your futures are pointing to a gap up, is that we actually kind of ran into this news. So gap up days can be very challenging. We might have some short-term overbought conditions, and you could see maybe after the gap, maybe you see a gap and pull. Um, but I think people were pricing in a potentially good outcome on Mexico heading into the event. So we need to be a bit cautious here and make sure that we're not chasing. Don't chase anything really on a gap up day on Monday. Maybe look for some kind of a intraday setup. SMH semiconductors, nice, same thing, right? We've got a higher low, and we actually already reclaimed the 200-day moving average. Look for that to hold. There are some good-looking names in SMH, and one of them I think we continue to watch for next week. I've got for the pro members. I'll have that out in a little bit. TVIX, if the markets do pull back after the big gap up, maybe we see some volatility. But I actually think that with this Mexico news, I mean, the next news, Trump is meeting Xi in at the G20, and maybe we get some good news out of there. If that happens, I think the bears are going to have a bit of a difficult time. But we'll see how it plays out. We're coming to the end of an earnings season, and the great thing about that is we got another one coming just a couple of weeks away. So we will have earnings that start to kick in once again. So TZA, small caps, if they really do roll over, we had a little failed attempt breakout, but we've got a cup with handle thing going on here. TZA, if IWM does roll back over, TZA short-term trading opportunity to the upside. UVXY, same thing as TVIX, right? Volatility has kind of been subdued. We'll see what happens next week. Aerospace Defense, I mentioned it last week, as being one of the strongest sectors to hold up throughout this recent weakness, and it really held up very well. But we are coming up into an area of potential price resistance. We've got a couple things going on. We've got potential price resistance here, and then we've got the underside of this trend line that we can contend with. And maybe we see a bit of a pause or basing or pullback within the aerospace industry. There are a couple of names in that space that I would love to see pull back so that I could actually get involved for a long-term hold play. But aerospace defense has been a sector that has held up extremely well. Home builders, have had a nice little bounce, put in a higher low, reclaimed the 50-day, actually stayed above the 200-day. I do have a home builder name that has probably an opportunity to play catch up next week for the home builder space. And with the talk of the Fed maybe potentially cutting rates, that could be something that gives home builders some continued lift. So worth keeping an eye on that space as we approach an area of price resistance around 41.50 or so. XLF financials reclaimed the 50-day. Actually looking fairly decent there on financials. There's usually thicker stocks, but worth keeping an eye on the financials. Industrials, reclaimed the 200-day. I think, and testing the 50-day. I think that is a sector, big concerns there with China. I think there are more concerns there with Mexico, but we've already kind of seen a nice little bounce there. We'll see if we get any follow through. Consumer staples, right? I think they had a nice pop, broke through little trend line resistance, maybe getting a bit extended. There's some really crazy valuations within that space. Just look at Beyond Meat. That is a crazy valuation, and who knows how much longer that runs, but you know, if you've got good profits in the consumer staples space, I don't think it would be a terrible thing to lock some in. I'm not telling you to sell it all, but maybe lock some in and look at some of these other sectors that have been pulling back and maybe finding some footing for a little bit of a move higher. So, healthcare broke through this trend line here and coming up into an area of potential price resistance. But I think that that is a sector where you have some stocks that have some pretty good looking valuations right now and could be a place to maybe transfer some of your consumer staples profits into the healthcare space. So I like the look of healthcare. I think that is one to keep an eye on. Consumer discretionary, a little bit of a bounce here, testing the 50-day, held the 200-day, actually looking fairly good. Maybe we go up and retest these highs up here in consumer discretionary. Energy and oil exploration, could be coming down. This XOP could be coming down to a double bottom test. I got to tell you, I'm just not crazy about oil and energy right now. When we had oil up near, what was it, getting near $70 a barrel, none of the energy names could make a move, and that was a bit disappointing. I thought it was maybe time for the sector to actually start to recover, but things still look tough there, and probably one of my least favorite sectors heading into next week. And then retail, look, retail scares me on many levels. I worry about probably retail as a sector the most, and in terms of how it may impact our economy down the road. Just does not look good. Maybe this is coming towards a double bottom bounce here, but it's a space that I really just avoid. So, but if you like retail and you're thinking maybe there could be a trade here, we are approaching a potential double bottom bounce, but I am not crazy about retail personally. All right, so that's that. Let's take a look and see what we've got going on. Actually, let me put this back over here and take a look. So we don't have a lot of earnings coming out next week. We've got a small group of stocks. We're winding down earnings season, but I do have some names from that list that have me intrigued. We'll have to see how it plays out next week, but let me point something else out here too. So I was talking over the last couple of weeks about the T2108, T2107, and that they were getting down to areas where they're becoming, remember, 2020 is the spot, right, where we get the 20 or lower, could be an opportunity for a bounce, and we got that opportunity. T2108 indicator and T2107, I think, are really indicators that you want to keep a pretty close eye on. And same thing with the McClellan oscillator, right? The T2106. I think those are three indicators that you want to pay pretty close attention to when we get down to the extremes. 180, negative 180, negative 200. We're typically due for some type of a relief rally or bounce. And T2108, we get 20 or lower. T2107, 20 or lower, get a relief rally or bounce, and we've gotten that. So that kind of is my concern with this gap up that we're looking at for next week, is that we've already had a pretty nice relief rally. What keeps us going, right? So is this news already priced in? Be careful next week. All right, do not chase, do not chase, do not chase. All right, now let's get to the stocks to watch for next week that have earnings. Now, NEPT had a little announcement of with Tilray. They signed a deal, got a big pop on Friday. Now, this thing has had a very difficult time getting through the $5 holla, right? I mean, this is a big area of potential resistance for NEPT. They came out with this news heading into their earnings. I do not expect that you're going to see a great earnings report because these guys are still getting their facilities up and running. So I just don't think you're going to see a great earnings report. I think the timing of that news release is interesting. This could get a red to green follow through, take out $5. You're taking out some new highs or taking out a resistance level. How long that lasts? Actually, is that all-time highs? Let me just take a look. Boy, this is a big, big area of resistance, right? So could maybe go up and retest the $6 area, red to green. I think I would be cautious of holding this thing through earnings, and they have earnings on, let's take a look. NEPT reports Wednesday after the close. So, look, if they report a great earnings report, maybe if this does, run into the earnings report, takes out $5, it takes out, goes up test 6, maybe $5 or 475 becomes the new support area. What was resistance becomes support. If they disappoint but give good guidance, if you play this red to green and you take it for a couple of days into the earnings, you have a nice little profit, you want to keep a little lotto, that could make sense, but it's up 30% on Friday. Like I said, a nice red to green, a pullback to 450 or so. See if that holds a support. There was some resistance there. See if that holds support for a bounce. Could be a day trading opportunity. Could be a short-term swing. Could be a play after earnings if they give good guidance, right? All right. I got a lot of love this week. A lot of love. So I have LOV here on accident because really I'm kind of just going over the earnings, the stocks to watch for next week, at least in this video, are just earning stocks. But I decided to add this one because I was actually looking up another earning stock and I came across this symbol. So I really like the look of love here. It popped up. I think this was off of earnings. This thing has pulled all the way back to the 200-day moving average, right? And this long-term trend line. So it's testing the top of the long-term trend line. It's testing the 200-day as support. You've got stochastics, which are starting to curl up. We're flirting with the $12 holla. I love round number rolls. It's got an interesting look. So worth keeping an eye on this one for a trend line break over 12 with some conviction. Could be a day trading opportunity. I'm not sure what the float is on this one, but definitely worth having on the radar. I like the look of this setup quite a bit. And then the one I actually was looking at was Love, L-O-V, Love Sack. Retail name, of course, not one of my favorites, but I have to say, it does have a pretty good looking setup on the daily, right? We're sitting right on top of the 50-day moving average, looking for a potential trend line break, maybe a 40 test and roll, go back up and retest all-time highs. It's a good looking setup there on Love Sack. Lots of love in the room today. Love and love. Both of them pretty interesting looking setups and worth having on the radar. SPCB. So ugly chart, ugly long-term chart, testing, all-time lows, testing the $1 holla as support. If it breaks below $1, you're going to have to do, it stays there for a while. I'm going to wind up having to do a reverse split and all that stuff to stay listed. But the CEO expanded personal share buys to 2 million shares. Getting pretty aggressive here on SPCB. Last earnings were actually pretty decent. maybe this $1 holla axis support, and these guys report. When do they report? SPCB. Oh, they report Monday before the open. So we'll know pretty early on whether or not this one could be a trading opportunity. Let me just see if I can pull up. I want to take a look at the float here. SPCB, the float on that was 8.85 million shares. Pretty small float on SPCB. And while I'm here, take a look at Love. Love, LOV, only has 3.4 million shares in the float. That's got a pretty tiny float. So a couple of small float stocks here. The problem with SPCB, traded 25,000 shares on Friday. You need to have some volume in order to be able to trade this thing. But $1 could be acting as a support area. AZRE, these guys report on Monday after the close. So I like it because it's got a pretty good looking setup here. Potential flat top breakout, maybe a reverse head and shoulders pattern, right? We've got a little reverse head and shoulders pattern going on. We got nice consolidation, potential flat top breakout. Another one that trades extremely thin, 20,000 shares on Friday. But flirting with the 200-day moving average. You've got a golden cross. You get any kind of volume. Maybe you get a nice trading opportunity in AZRE just because of where it is setting up. Another one that's flirting with the $12 holla. Lululemon retail. I'm not going to play it, but looks like we had a gap up off the last earnings. This thing's flirting with all-time highs. Maybe it's going to, on the way to testing the $200 holla. I think it's worth at least keeping an eye on Lulu. If you are inclined to play retail, I think that this is one to see if maybe we can take out some new highs. TUFN is the next one on the list here. That is a recent IPO. $21 appears to be holding as support. They report Thursday. Let's see, before the open. If it breaks down below 21, maybe we're heading back down to do a double bottom test. But if these guys report a decent number, give a good guide, we could see a break and test back up into the 24.50 range. So it's been trading within this channel. I think it's worth having on the radar. See if maybe we can go back up and test 24 and change. Kulp. So not a good looking chart, but if we back this thing out to a weekly, monthly time frame, this is an area of potential price support. And if you look at it, also we have a trend line. See, now that's interesting because I looked at this on the weekly. If I look at this on the weekly, right, we had this trend line that was acting as potential support. But if you go back to the monthly, which I didn't do, I'm just doing that now, we actually kind of broke through the longer term trend line. We actually broke through this trend line. We're coming back up. We came up and kissed it, and now we're pulling back again. So 10.2 million shares in the float. Trades extremely thin. This 1650 area could be an interesting spot for potential support. They report after the close on Wednesday. Not one of my favorite looks. Just it's got a small float. If they report better than expected earnings and maybe give a good guide, could be a little bounce here. I wouldn't chase this thing at all, and I would make sure that it's got some volume before trying to trade it. And I mean, look, all the moving averages are sloping down on this. I'm not super crazy about this thing, but it does kind of have an interesting look for potential support. And then LIVX is the last one. This one is actually traded about 100,000 shares, which isn't all that bad on Friday. Testing $3 as potential support. There were insider buys at $3, and these guys report Thursday before the open. So, I don't like the fact that we're getting a death cross. We've got the 50 crossing below the 200 day. I do like the fact that you got insiders buying in the $3 area, and that's where we happen to be sitting. If it breaks below $3, that could be a bit problematic for LIVX. Looks like this was probably some kind of a reverse merger, I would guess. 250 would be a double bottom test. I mean, it's at least worth having on the radar, right? So, worth having on the radar. It looks like they already gave prelim guidance, and it's looking pretty good, but the stock hasn't reacted. I don't know. Gets any volume, could be a trade opportunity, worth at least having on the radar. And that is it. That is my whole spiel for this week. Gap up days can be very, very challenging. Keep in mind that we ran into the gap up day. Do not chase. Have a plan. Know your risk reward. If you like what you see here, please hit the like button on the video. Share it with friends. And if you're interested in becoming a member over at Alpha Wolf Trading, come over and check us out. And that's it. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and good luck trading next week.